Okay, so there is a whey protein shortage coming. And I know you're thinking, Jenny, what am I going to do? My protein Pop Tarts are going to get expensive. And, for me, honestly, good. Because maybe this is the reset we all needed. So if you don't know, now you know. I'm Jenny. Welcome back. And since it's summer here, I've got a freshly cropped and sleeveless tee on to get going because it's hot. But I'm glad you found us because now you know the attire, right? You're a former athlete. You know exactly what it takes to get the right armhole length on your t-shirts. And now you're probably at a point in your life where you also want to feel like the athlete that you were. So on this show, we talk real training, real food. We avoid any of the fluffy stuff. There's no sponsors, so I'm not going to tell you to go drink greens at 5 a.m., right? We're just getting down to the basics. And we're going to do so from the lens of someone who's played a sport for their entire life up until the point that they became a professional and got a real job, unfortunately. So today, this is the deep dive I teased in my Substack article this last week. So if you haven't read it, go ahead, take a look. It's in your inbox. And this deep dive is how do you actually eat for your health without logging your food? Because logging your food seems to be the gold standard, but it becomes so overwhelming for so many people that they either get really restrictive and really rigid, or they start for a little bit and then they fall off. But today, I've got a method for you that's been around longer than that protein powder that you're going to be paying a lot more for, longer than that dumb USDA pyramid that people tend to argue about, and probably longer than really everything we've been told about food. And that's what we're going to cover today. So stick with me because we're going to go back in history in just a second. But let's start with what's happening in the nutrition world because, as always, it's wild, right? The latest trend, and I say this with full transparency of how ridiculous it sounds, protein maxing. You've got mogging, you've got flogging, you've got all these things that the kids talk about. But today, it's protein maxing for those influencers, right? So you've got protein in your Pop-Tarts. You've put protein in your cereal. Ice cream now gets labeled as high protein. You've got water also sprinkled with that little protein dust, right? People out here stacking grams of protein like they're playing a video game. And I think it starts to become a little bit ridiculous that protein has become the currency of health. And that's just not what it does, right? So why has protein gained such popularity that it has its own end cap in the grocery store? Like the entire health food section of my local Kroger has about a third of it just for protein options, powders, bars, all of the sort. Well, there's a few reasons this is the thing. All right, number one is GLPs are making sure that people eat a lot less. So with that, protein becomes the priority, or should be the priority anyway. And so because they can't eat a lot, they're going to use these supplemental ways to get dense portions of protein into their diets, right? So they're going really low carb, really high protein. So that's one reason. So these GLP-1s that were just deregulated slightly so that they can be a little bit more affordable. The second thing is that, oh my God, as soon as a health influencer catches wind of anything that could improve their life by 1%, guess what they do? They start to beat that drum even louder. And we've been talking about protein for a really long time in the fitness industry, at least for as long as I've been in it. And I've been coaching 15 years, right, on the fitness side. So, really it comes down to the marketers have now gotten a hold of it. And there were whispers of protein, like, yeah, you should eat a little bit more chicken because that's what the bodybuilders do. Yeah, you should eat a protein shake after your workout because of the anabolic window. But now the marketers, oh my God, they figured out that if they give you one good reason to eat protein, that reason is going to print money for them. And I mean print. Now, on the flip side of that, so for every good thing that happens for the economy, there's probably a bad thing, right? When you've got your entire consumer base suddenly demanding protein enriched everything, right? Even your toilet paper is probably protein enriched at this point. And it comes from a singular source, with whey protein being the number one source of supplemental protein in most processed foods. It puts a big strain on the supply chain. And if you don't know, whey protein is a dairy product, and it is the byproduct of making cheese. Okay, and we'll come back to that towards the end. But the supply chain now starts to get a little bit tighter, and so when supply goes down relative to the increase in demand, that means prices follow the demand. The prices go up. Your shelves start to look a little sparse because the manufacturers are running low on ingredients. And so they can't make enough, but in order to make their bottom lines for their investor groups, right, it becomes a capitalist thing. So nothing wrong with that, but just understand that these boxed and packaged items aren't the only way that you can get protein, okay? It comes in whole foods. But if your protein strategy depends on these protein Pop-Tarts, on that protein water, then you're in a more fragile position than you probably thought. And I think that reveals something pretty important here. And that is that protein isn't magic. It is a macronutrient. It's a scientific thing, right? It's a part of the puzzle and a big part of the puzzle, but this obsession around it has probably made more people constipated than fiber has made people unconstipated, right? The big obsession leads to a drop in the bucket as it relates to results, but it's not the only thing that drives overall health. If you were to only eat protein and sprinkle in some vegetables here and there, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be healthy. Is it better than eating a bunch of junk food? Unfortunately, it depends. It depends on what types of junk foods, what quantities, right? And so here's how I think about this. When it comes to nutrition, there are typically three outcomes, and I'm borrowing this from Tyler Minton, who's a nutrition coach up in Virginia. When it comes to your nutrition, there are three things that you're going to chase. You've got the option to pursue your health overall, you can pursue performance, or you can pursue aesthetics. And I'm talking about extremes here. And really, the only one that you need to chase to the extreme is your health, because that's going to be the thing that carries you for the long run. Remember, performance is how we would eat when we were competing 10, 15, 20 years ago. And aesthetics really only matters if you are stepping on stage in a bikini, ladies, heels, fellas, barefoot, and you've got veins popping out of every last inch of your body. You have striated glutes. And if you don't know what striated glutes are, it's not safe for work. Don't Google it on your work computer, but Google it on your phone when you get home, okay? Those are the three things that you can chase. And a lot of times the fitness industry will try to sell you all three of those things in one, and there are different times for each of those outcomes. But for the majority of us, if we can chase health where our blood work looks good. Remember, I shared on my social that I just got mine back. And I do think that because I eat mostly whole foods, I exercise, I try to manage my stress. That was the one outstanding thing on my blood work was overall stress. And I try to eat well enough to fuel the work that I'm trying to do. My blood work came back pretty damn excellent. Like, I was surprised how few things that I even needed to address. I don't know that yours would come back like that unless you were to really invest in your health and chasing it to an extreme, okay? But if you're chasing health, that means your weight is manageable. Your energy is there, right? And this is a high quality of life that you don't need a ton of pills, a ton of powders, any sort of syrups, or creams to sustain it, right? This is a high investment on time, energy, and effort into the things that you put in your body for fuel. And I am super proud to say, and I don't think it's braggadocious by any means, it's just, it is what it is. Like, I live a high caliber, high quality of life without needing a prescription. I am not on a prescription. I am on a daily multivitamin, and I've got my creatine and protein supplements, but that's it, right? My shelves aren't full of things that are keeping me healthy other than the foods that I eat and the exercise that I do. And I'm really proud to say that as an almost 40-year-old, I haven't needed any sort of prescription pretty much my entire life, right? So again, not to brag, but it's an N of one. I think this science experiment is going pretty damn well, okay? The second piece that you could chase, which again, this is the thing we chased when we were in college or when we were still competing. That means you're fueling for high outputs. You're not fueling to have a six pack. You are fueling to compete and play in games, right? Having money riding on your ability to make a roster means that you need to be fueling it to have a high performance output. That's a completely different game than chasing extreme health. And then I've already mentioned aesthetics, and we're talking about like IFBB Pro, Stage Lean, right? There's probably some sort of pharmaceutical enhancement, and I ain't talking about your Lexapro or any of your SSRIs. Like, these are injectables that the influencers tell you they're not on, but they probably are, whether they admit it or not. So if you chase extreme aesthetics, that's kind of the other tip of the triangle here. And what I want to share, because of these three things, right? Health is the peak, right? At this point in our lives, when we prioritize health, right? That's where you get increases in performance and aesthetics. So both of those tend to rise the closer you get to the peak of that pyramid. Now, what happens on the flip side of that is when you start to chase extreme aesthetics, it actually pulls away from your performance, and it pulls away from your health. Well, go to the other corner. When you start to chase extreme performance, health becomes less of a priority and output is the priority. And then aesthetics are also not the priority, so it starts to pull from aesthetics. And so when you look at some of these bodies in the NBA, in the NFL, in name the professional sport, baseball, they perform at a high level, but maybe they don't look Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition ready. There usually is a little bit of work that goes into it. And so the mistake a lot of people make is chasing one of those bottom two items when their lifestyle really is only built to chase health. And we've all seen it. You've all seen your friend who's still coaching or still trying to play well into their 30s, chasing this, and the only thing that happens is they end up hurt, tearing an Achilles. I've seen this probably 5 or 6 times over the last 10 years, where someone who's still trying to chase that hoop dream, and they end up hurt, they end up out of work. It sets them back in their career. And again, there's nothing wrong with chasing it, but what are you actually investing in, right? And so the thing that actually drives improved health on the nutrition side is really simple in theory, but can be very challenging in practice. And in the article, I think I called it the 3 little bears approach, but it is eating enough to support what you do. Okay. Not too much, not too little, right? It's Goldilocks, essentially, right? So instead of your porridge being too hot, too cold, just right, you don't eat too much, you don't eat too little, you eat just enough. And that number tends to fluctuate. Someone commented on one of my posts last week about nutrition on Instagram. And they're like, well, how do I know what maintenance is if it's always changing and there's always this influx of information that's coming in? Well, the body is this great science experiment. And so maintenance isn't a set target. It's actually a moving target depending on where your body weight is And again, if you're tracking your macros, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like the goal of getting to maintenance can be challenging because your body's going to react to that number of calories differently than someone else. And so I say all this to say you don't actually need to track your calories to get yourself to a good spot with your body composition and your health. I love telling people you don't ever have to track a day in your life. But there are some concessions that come with that. Now, calorie tracking is fantastic if it's used for the right reasons, okay? If we're looking for a specific performance or a specific body composition goal, but if your goal is just to get to a point where you can move well, feel good, and ultimately have a great life that's not totally dedicated to the gym and the kitchen, then fine. Then this approach will work. But for general health, for people who are just, again, trying to look and move and feel better than they are right now, there's an easier way. And it sort of dates back to the Roman Empire. And let me tell you what I mean by this. So let's do a quick flashback. Kalia will love this. So one of my teammates, Kalia, was from Eastern Tennessee. So I went to see her one summer, and she was in summer school at taking anthropology. So of course, the day I get there, she's like, "All right, we're going to class." And I'm like, "We're going to class? I'm not enrolled in class." She's like, "Well, I am, and I have to go." I was like, "All right, we're going to class." Well, on that day, they were talking about the Roman Empire and how they used the Vitruvian method for kind of sculpting the perfect human body. So this goes back, and I'm gonna use notes for this one so I don't screw this up. But Vitruvius was one of the Roman architects in the 1st century BC, so a really freaking long time ago. And one of the pieces that he wrote, De Architectura, is where he described the ideal proportions of the human body. Okay, so his framework used body parts as subsequent units of measure. Okay, like the width of a finger, the breadth of a palm, the length of a foot. The whole crux of this is that the human body is its own proportional system. Okay, one of the things that stuck out is that your height will always be 6x the length of your foot. And I was like, oh my God, that's so right. I have a 12-inch foot. I am 6 feet tall. Vitruvius is the man. He's spot on, okay? Your hands. Well, when you put your hands together and cover your face, the ideal Roman proportion was that each hand totally covered the face, right? And so one thing references everything else. And so this idea of Da Vinci's Vitruvian man, well, that came from this one dude, Vitruvius. And so I say all this to say that the Romans had it figured out centuries ago, and we've managed to complicate this thing for years, okay? Keep in mind, your body is calibrated to itself. It is destined for the dimensions that have already been proportioned by the greater being that is, right? And so this is the exact principle behind what I'm about to show you, which is the hand portion method. Now, this doesn't involve a phone. This doesn't involve a scale. All you need is a good working hand. And I would say use the hand that doesn't have a broken finger on it. Okay, so if you're a basketball, football player, pick the better of the two. But for the most part, a larger person has a larger hand. And if we're using the hand as a measuring tool, the larger person then eats a little bit more. Smaller person, smaller hands, they eat less. So this automatically adjusts how much you're portioning out for yourself based on your individual size. So again, you don't need a food scale. You don't need an app. You don't need to track any of this. Like, it's closer to intuitive eating with a little bit of structure, okay? So for women, in general, this is what it's going to break down to, okay? For your protein, you're looking at 1 palm-sized portion of protein in width, height, and thickness. So my hand is almost 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick, right? So if I were to serve this up as a piece of a chicken breast, that's one good serving of chicken, or one good serving of steak or a pork chop or whatever piece of meat you choose, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt, it needs to be the equivalent of this. Now, if you're training really hard, you're in the gym 3 to 4 days a week, you can probably get away with 2 portions of protein, but 1 for the most part is a good starting point, okay? So that's your protein. Then we're going to cup your hand, okay? When you cup your hand, this is going to be for your carbohydrates. So think starches like potatoes, rice, apples, bananas. So fruits fall into this as well. So whatever fits in a cupped hand, that is your serving of carbs, okay? Pretty straightforward so far, right? So think about it this way. We're building a plate. Now we get to vegetables. And these are going to be things like your leafy greens, peppers, zucchini, cucumbers, tomatoes, right? Anything that comes from the garden, you can eat up to 2 clenched fists of these. And also, by the way, most people don't eat enough vegetables in life ever. So if you can get 2 fists of vegetables, you're doing way better. And then you don't need that greens drink that everybody's drinking at 5 a.m. Okay? And this is per meal. Okay? And then the thing that we haven't mentioned are fats. Okay? So fats, think of this as the base of your thumb to the tip of your thumb. That can be of peanut butter, olive oil, butter, avocado, right? Fats are more calorically dense, so a little goes a long way here. All right, so that's the ladies. It's pretty straightforward. 1 to 2 palm-sized portions of protein, okay? 1 cup of carbohydrates. Now again, if you're training hard, you can always increase this, but your weight's going to tell you, your energy is going to tell you if you need to increase or decrease any of these. 2 fists of vegetables and a thumb of fat. Pretty straightforward. Now, men, typically larger human beings, so they're going to get a little bit more, but the same rules apply. So now it's 2 to 3 pounds of protein, okay? Bigger body, a little bit more muscle mass, they get a little bit more protein. 2 cupped hands of carbs, 2 fists of vegetables, and vegetables just make up a lot of dense space in your stomach, so you don't have to worry too much about that. And then 1 to 1.5 thumbs of fat. Again, their thumb is going to be bigger. Just depends on what else they've got to eat that day. All right. And then, so that's men and women. Okay. Age doesn't really matter. Body weight doesn't really matter. But the thing that you'll start to notice are the 2 things I've already mentioned. How much energy you have and how your weight is going to fluctuate. Because if you were to build these meals on a plate, like 2 palms of chicken, 2 cups of rice, 2 fists of broccoli, a thumb and a half of olive oil to cook it all in, that's a big plate of food. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to gain weight from eating that. No, you're not. That is a very calorically light order of food, especially when you're managing how much oil you're cooking it in and managing the types of sauces that you are putting on it. So, some people, if we were to create that same recipe of chicken, rice, broccoli, and a little bit of olive oil, they're like, oh, I need some teriyaki sauce because I don't like eating plain food. Fine. But that means instead of the 2 cupped hands of rice, that means maybe you only get 1 cupped hand of rice and the teriyaki sauce on top because it is higher in total carbohydrates. And so you're just trading one thing for the other. Now, if you were still to eat that meal, you're going to be pretty full. And that's the entire genius of using this system. So when you build meals in this way, you're anchoring them in real whole foods, and then you get full, right? The comparison I always use here is that you can sit and eat a bag of potato chips, and it's roughly equivalent to 3 to 4 full-size baking potatoes. When was the last time you ate 3 to 4 full-size baking potatoes in one sitting? Probably never, right? And so when you're able to eat this way with whole foods, you get a lot of volume of food for not a lot of calories. And then those cravings that normally come because you have eaten all of that food where you're like, oh man, I need the protein shake, I need the protein bar, I need something sweet. Like they just don't show up anymore because you've actually eaten food with fiber, with water content, and a little bit of variety and flavor. And that actually goes a really long way. Okay. Second, pretty sure you've hit your protein target without eating any sort of engineered foods, right? If you're eating 2 palms of protein at every single meal, you're doing fine. Like, I know my friends typically make fun of me when I go out and order double meat. Now, these are my regular gym friends. My coworkers know that I'm getting double, if not triple meat, and there's not an eye batted. But my friends are like, seriously, this is what we're doing? And the answer is always yes. I'm willing to pay for that extra serving of protein to make sure that I get my 2 palms of protein at this meal. Okay? Because when you do that, you don't need the protein enriched Cheerios that you were looking at in the grocery store that are now $17 a box. Right? You don't need the protein powder in your oatmeal, but maybe in your coffee. And you don't need to worry about figuring out shortcuts for when things are short. You're eating enough at every single meal, and this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So maybe you don't eat a ton of veggies with breakfast, but maybe you do eat some potatoes that are roasted instead of fried, and you eat eggs and a yogurt instead of eggs and bacon and all the other things that typically come with breakfast. Like, you can do this at every single meal. And probably the most important piece is that you're going to stop overeating. If you have a tendency to overeat, this puts the pin in that, right? There's only so much broccoli you can eat before your body says, I can't eat. No, can't do it. You're also not going to sit and eat 6 chicken breasts in one sitting either, because that also gets kind of dry and no, I don't even want to think about it. Okay. But you know what does happen? You accidentally eat a whole sleeve of Oreos. See the difference? They're tasty, they're delicious. You eat them mindlessly versus I actually have to chop and cut and eat this food and chew it so I don't choke. And that food matrix, the thing that makes up the whole food, actually matters and plays a part when it comes to overeating, because that food matrix holds fiber, it holds water, it gives things bulk, and there are other vitamins and minerals that come along with it that are typically stripped away from foods that are highly processed, like an Oreo. All right. So I feel like I've had several cups of coffee before hopping on here today, but I want to bring this full circle and remind myself really, that I was going to tell you about where whey protein came from. Okay. So whey protein for years and years is what's separated from the curds. Okay. So you get this liquid that is then dried, and it becomes this powder situation. Okay. Well, cheese manufacturers were just dumping it out on their farms. They were feeding it back to their animals. Like, it really was a waste product until somebody figured out, holy cow, pun intended, there's a lot of protein per serving in this. And so somebody figured it out. They sold it to bodybuilders. Bodybuilders were like, oh my God, this is the most anabolic thing I've ever eaten. Then the marketers picked it up, and now we've got protein everything. And now the supply chain is running thin because it hasn't kept up with demand over the years. I remember the first jug of protein I got, I think I was a junior in high school. I'm like, what is this? This tastes like absolute ass. And over the years, the quality and taste and texture of the stuff has changed, but it's still the base source of whey protein. And you've got isolate and you've got concentrate. And I could probably break down the difference between the two of you, but we'll save that for another conversation. But the idea was, right, this idea of protein being in the aisles of the grocery store, not in the perimeters, is wild to me, right? The protein in your local grocery store has always been in the meat department. It's always been in the deli. It's always been on the perimeter and not down an aisle. Because that's where it is. If it's shelf stable, it's probably meant to last forever, but it also means that's not real food. It's a food-like substance. And in health, because we're chasing extreme health, we need real food And we need it in proportions that match your body. Use your hand. Your hand matches how much you should eat. Again, I know it's a wild concept to understand, and you need to eat with a frequency that matches your activity. If you're a desk worker, 3 square meals a day is plenty. If you're a bodybuilder where you're trying to be the most anabolic bro in the building, yeah, maybe 6 meals a day because you have to eat such a large quantity of food is the thing. It's not that it makes you more anabolic or thermic or whatever word you want to throw on it. That's not the case. You're just trying to fuel to match the demands you're placing on the body. So now here's what I want you to do, because this has been a lot. I want you to think about 2 things. First thing, does the plate of food that you're going to go home and make for dinner tonight align with this hand measurement strategy? Do you have 2 palms of protein, 1 to 2 cupped hands of carbohydrates, 2 fists of veggies, a thumb to a thumb and a half of fats? If you do, great. High five. If not, what do you need to do to get to that point, right? What do you need to adjust? Do you need to add more veggies? Do you need to decrease the carbs? Do you need to decrease the fats? Do you need to increase the protein? But it all comes down to your plate, not anybody else's. Make the adjustments for yourself. Okay, I want you to feel empowered to do that. And then the second thing, go back to the article. It's on Substack, and if you can't find it there, it's in your inbox. And leave a comment. That's all. I need you to just leave a comment. You can say, great. You can say high five. You can put an emoji. I don't care. Just leave a comment, because when you do, I'm going to give away a free 4-week program to everyone who does, okay? This is 4 weeks of training, nutrition, and lifestyle work all in a packet. It's a PDF, and I will email it to you. And it goes through everything we talked to today. Now, if you're already following an exercise program, you can disregard, because the program in this is pretty simple. It really is for people trying to get back into it. But the nutrition piece is not. You can take the nutrition piece from this 4-week program and start implementing it as soon as you get the PDF, okay? There's no tracking. Everything is kind of built there for you. Now, if you do choose to do this, you can use the macros that I've provided, but you can also use the meal plans that are in there. And I'm not telling you to go buy any supplements. I'm not telling you to go spend your entire check at Whole Foods, but I want to eliminate the guesswork for you, okay? And I want to help you get back towards health and athleticism, because we know what it's like to be athletic. Some of us don't know what it's like to be healthy. And I want to provide that structured jumpstart for you. Okay, so you get 4 weeks of workouts, 4 weeks of eating, and 4 weeks of small lifestyle adjustments that start to add up to something real. Okay, because again, you're an athlete. Sometimes you just need the reminder. So comment on the article. I'll send it over to you. And as always, thanks for being here. Until next time, we'll talk soon.